Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. This is episode 292. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today and NFL Wire site covering the Arizona Cardinals. And with me, as always, is Seth Cox from AvengeOfTheBirds.com, which is the Arizona Cardinals site from SB Nation's family of sites of what is it, 300 some odd sites. And today, recording, we're actually a day later with the holidays. As I was traveling, forgot my microphone, and so we are recording on a Wednesday night instead of a Tuesday night, but we still have lots to talk about. Seth, we've got playoff scenarios. We've got the Pro Bowl. We've got an impressive win, or an unimpressive win. We got another Player of the Week award for Kyler Murray, and we have a Week 16 home finale against the 49ers. Which are you most excited to talk about in this show?
I think just for the fact that it's still the biggest thing is the 49ers game, because as much as they've tried all season to not put themselves in playoff position, they're still in that playoff position, and they control that playoff position, but they play the 49ers, and the team that is chasing them, the Chicago Bears, get to play you and me and some people that write for our sites, I think, is who they have to play on on Sunday with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, I'm very interested in how they come out and play against what is a depleted but likely desperate to win another game San Francisco team, and if they can kind of continue to play with that urgency they played with for, 3 quarters on Sunday against the Eagles, that, helped them win a game, and if they can find a way to continue that this week and guarantee that they don't have a losing season for the first time in 5 years. Holy cow.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. Now, let's go ahead and start. So we're going to talk about, we're a little bit, the game on Sunday is a little bit in the rearview mirror, but we still want to talk about the reactions to how they played in that game and some of the results from that, like Kyler Murray winning another Player of the Week. But in addition to that, what we're going to talk about in this show, we're going to react to the Pro Bowl selections that were made. Who else perhaps deserved recognition being selected? We're going to look at the playoff scenarios for the Cardinals and then look ahead to that Week 16 matchup on Saturday, not Sunday, against the San Francisco 49ers. So let's talk about the game on Sunday. 33-26 over the Philadelphia Eagles. It started out so good, that 16-0 lead, and you're like, all right, this is not a repeat of the Miami game. And then suddenly it felt like the Miami game. Only the difference was this time was the fact that they did not have to play from behind. They maintained the lead and never relinquished it, which was really good. So let's start with the stuff we were concerned about, and then we'll end on we'll start with the bad, end with the good, and then kind of move forward to that. What were the things that were most concerning to you in the game on Sunday?
I think the two things that are concerning, and we'll start with the first, was the defensive consistent effort on defense. This is the second time that a rookie in their second start has come out and really just completely dominated the game. Jalen Hurts' performance was, it was on par with what Kyler Murray did. And I'm a fan of Jalen Hurts. I've always liked him as a player, but I'm sorry, that was a little much. And a lot of that comes from the secondary, specifically the corners. Chris Banjo had a decent game, but, specifically the corners are just not good. And I think that's kind of continued to be an ongoing issue. And that combined with maybe early, or not early, but in that middle part of the game where they weren't being really creative with the pass rush, just put too much pressure on the defense, and they just could not overcome Jalen Hurts, which is maybe not a concern next week when they play the 49ers and CJ Beathard. It's maybe not a concern even against Jared Goff, even though Jared Goff's had, fantastic games against them. But if they end up with the 7 seed and end up having to play Drew Brees or Russell Wilson, that's going to be a concern.
For me, what I find so hard to deal with when you're watching that game is just the fact of how uneven the defense seems to play, because they're doing great for a while. I mean, and you look at the stats. Like, granted, Jalen's performance, Hurts' performance was stellar, and you have to tip your hat to him in a lot of ways, because he was fantastic. And the game plan was clearly to try and make him do things. But just the part that was so frustrating was anytime they had a 3rd and long, how many times do they get, like, 3rd and 20? Why? 3rd and 23? How? How do you give up those plays when you're so great in other things? But then you look at the stat line, you're like, 6 sacks? A whole bunch of hurries? Like, in some ways, the defense did a pretty good job against him, because at least, especially early in the game, they had a good game plan. It
was the beginning and the end was really, really well done. It was that from about the beginning to the early stages of the second quarter till the middle of the fourth quarter, so let's just call it 2.5 quarters, was just bad. And that is something we've consistently seen outside of the Giants game. They do not put together 4 consecutive quarters of dominant football. And to be fair, I'm trying to think of who the dominant defenses are in the NFL right now. I mean, the Steelers have a really good defense, and they've lost 3 in a row, including one to the Bengals with their 3rd string quarterback. The Saints had the number 1 defense, and they've lost 2 in a row or 3 in a row now. So, I mean, I don't mean to sound like they're bad, but they're a middle of the road defense that plays really high and really low. And that is an issue when you watch them. And I think that's what the biggest thing is that they have these lulls in their game. And when they hit those lulls, it ends up being almost too much for the offense to overcome. I mean, let's be honest. When an offense scores 26 points, you should win a game. That should not. I mean, I don't want to say it's automatic, because there are no automatic, wins in the NFL. But if you're giving up less than 26 points, you should win. The Cardinals are giving up 23.5. So they're right at the spot where they should be, right around, let's say, 24 points per game. They're scoring 28 points per game. It makes sense that that's where they would be. And so when they give up more than that 24, even though they're still scoring that 28, that's where the problem becomes, because you can't, if you have a top 10 scoring offense, which they do, you should win games consistently if your defense is consistent. And I think that, I mean, the offense, which we'll get into, has some issues as well, but the defense just lacks consistency, and that kind of shows.
The other thing for me negatively that is the issue, there's two things on offense that I just can't get over. One, obviously, are the turnovers. Like, the Cardinals were extremely fortunate that they got a win turning the ball over 3 times. And not only did they turn the ball over 3 times, they turned it over twice in the red zone. This game should not have been close. And maybe that was part of the issue with Philadelphia coming back, is because the Cardinals just simply, they didn't put them away. They had the chance in an opening drive. DeAndre Hopkins fumbles the ball. I have no idea what Kyler saw on the when he only threw the interception in the end zone, because he had a look and he chose not to do it. But it looked like he was looking at Christian Kirk, but then decided to throw it somewhere else.
Well, and they showed it on the replay, and I know you were at the game, so it was a little tougher for you to see. They did show it on the game that he pulled back. He tried to pull it back. Obviously, it was a terrible throw, so I don't want to make an excuse for him, but he saw it late. He tried to not throw it, but he had already kind of started his motion, and it was, too little too late at that point, and you saw the result of it. So when you watch it, you see what he saw. Like you said, he saw Christian Kirk flashing open, and then he saw the safety that was sitting and had drifted, and it was just too late for him to change his mind.
The other thing is the short yardage. It's for a team that runs the ball as well as the Cardinals do, are awful at picking up first downs when they're at 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. It seems like they fail
4th and 1, yeah.
It's every single time. Like, if they just go with a straight run, they never do it. And I don't know if it is because they have chosen not to go with the Christian level package every once in a while, where you do the QB sneak. If that is something that is limited them, because we know that Kyler Murray is not part of that package. He, I guess, does not feel comfortable going under center and pushing forward. Honestly, it makes sense for a guy of his size, but a guy who runs as well as he does, it makes sense for him to be in space. But on those 4th and inches, 3rd and inches, it makes sense, honestly, if you can do it pretty much every time, QB sneak. But you've got a running back in Kenyon Drake who runs physical, who's big enough to pick up short yardage, and in a lot of ways is good at picking up short. But they never can do it in those critical moments. And so when it's 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, and they try those running plays, for some reason they just can't do it. And for the life of me, a team that runs as well as they do, I don't know why they can't.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I've had some ideas and theories. The first being that they run out of the shotgun, and when you're running kind of a zone read, even if it is a straight handoff and you're running from that zone read, the defense is able, there's no threat of that interior quick, from the quarterback, as you said. So when you're running from the shotgun, if they just shut down the interior gaps, they don't have to worry about anything else. That's been an issue, and we've seen it around the NFL now a little more, because interior defensive linemen in the NFL are A, strong enough against offensive linemen, but B, they're quick enough that if you don't pull the ball consistently and run outside, that they have zero issue getting down the line and making a tackle on that play. And so we saw it a little bit in the Bengals Steelers game, where, and I know TJ Watt's kind of a different guy and maybe the best player on defense in the NFL, but TJ Watt would consistently make plays in the A gap, which is between the guard and the center, on third and, second and third and shorts, because he wasn't worried about Ryan Finley. Now, as the game went on, obviously Finley made him pay on a couple of those. But the other thing that they're doing is when Kyler does pull the ball, we're seeing them use safeties more to contain Kyler as opposed to linebackers. So they're filling the A, B, and C gap like you're supposed to, like you would think that they would. And then they're using safeties as kind of these downhill outside guys. And safeties tend to have the athletic ability to wrangle Kyler a little better than maybe obviously like a defensive lineman or a linebacker. Now, obviously not just as well, but it can still happen. And so when you look at it from that perspective, I think that's kind of what you're seeing on those short yardage plays, is that it's too easy for defenses because it's fill the gaps with your front seven, and then you're just basically saying we're going to trust our safeties to make a play on Kyler. And if Kyler, and we've talked about this on third and longs, basically it's if Kyler doesn't make a play, we're screwed. And that's asking a lot of a 23-year-old in general, but a 23-year-old who has a shoulder issue that maybe is still an issue. I think it would be smart to look into something different right now than continue to go with the status quo and just hope that things get better.
Well, and that leads me to the things that the positives for me. And I think this will help with the running game, especially with the short yardage things, is that his production in the passing game, the 406 yards, the 3 touchdowns, that is something that you're going to have to rely on. He made plays with his arm. Now, part of that is that DeAndre Hopkins is an absolute beast. He had the 45-yarder down the field. It kind of looked like the Hail Murray, but in the middle of the field and not in an end-of-game situation. He had the catch and run that went for 44 yards. He had the 20-yard touchdown catch, so there were some big plays in that sense. If Kyler is getting, even on those third and shorts, you pick up a couple of those third downs with a passing play, where you have a zone read look and he keeps the ball instead of running, he finds an open receiver. I think that will open things up more. And they're still not making enough plays in the passing game, but he's been productive. And so to see him take advantage of the Philadelphia injuries in the secondary, that was refreshing to see. You got a huge play from Max Williams. You got production from Dan Arnold, who's coming on strong at the end of the year. DeAndre Hopkins, you had the touchdown to Fitz. You kind of saw it across the board, and so that was something that was good to see. And so honestly, it's what earned Kyler that third Player of the Week award. Is 406 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. He did have the interception as well. That's fantastic stuff, and it was a way for him to. And if you look at the stat line, he didn't rush for 30 yards, and he didn't rush 10 times. And that has been terrible. Like, the Cardinals have been bad in those games. I think they've only won once. Well, including Sunday, it was only the second time they'd won since Kyler started last year, where he rushed for more than 30 yards. Where he rushed for under 30 yards. So that's kind of been the cutoff. So if he doesn't get at least 30 yards rushing, they don't win. They'd only done it once previously. And I think it's if he's rushed fewer than 10 times, I think they'd only had 3 wins in the last 2 years, something like that. That's the stat I don't remember at the top of my head. But he's been insistent that he doesn't have to run for the Cardinals to be successful, and that game showed how that can be. And he made play with his arms. It wasn't all great all the time, but that was a positive, something to be in the positive direction. Yes, I was thrilled about that. And then in addition to that, the pass rush has just been incredible. Now, you were facing especially Philadelphia, that's had so much shuffling on that offensive line. You know, Carson Wentz had been sacked 50 times at 11 games before Hurts took over. Hurts takes over. He was not sacked even once against the Saints, but the Cardinals get to him 6 times. Hassan Reddick had another 8 hurries. Dennis Gardeck had the two sacks. Marcus Golden had another few pressures, and so they were getting pressure. And again, this is happening without Marcus. This is happening without Chandler Jones. They continue to, and this is recently, because earlier in the year we talked about how they were getting the sacks, but they weren't getting the pressure. Now they're getting the sacks and the pressure.
Yeah, and they're closing and they're finishing, which is just nice to see. And you're seeing a lot, obviously, from Hassan Reddick and Dennis Gardeck, but what both those guys bring that the Cardinals have lacked really all season is that hustle play, is that play that it comes from maybe you miss the first time and you get the second time. They're taking advantage of getting in pass rushing situations as well, which is something they weren't doing before. And then I think, we've kind of talked about it. When their defensive line is healthy, when they're getting that interior push, it does allow for them to get a little more from their edge rushers. And that's going to be important when you kind of watch their pass rush, because Reddick's developing more moves, but when you watch Gardeck, and this isn't a shot at him because this works, he's an effort pass rusher. And when he's able to have a kind of a straight line towards the passer, it makes it a little easier to close and get those sacks, as opposed to having to maybe make a move and try and dip and bend and do those things. When he's able to just kind of bull rush and use his motor and he is very strong. We talked a little bit, and I don't want this, to be overstated. So I want everybody to just calm down. But we talked a little bit about last week. He is kind of built similar to James Harrison, who was probably pound for pound, maybe the strongest NFL player that played. I'm not saying that's going to be Gardeck, or I shouldn't say that. I'm not saying that is Gardeck, and I don't know if he can ever get to that point in his career, but that he plays with, at this juncture, a similar kind of style where you're talking about undersized, short arms, but when he gets into a player's body, they can't control him.
Yeah, Vance Joseph talked about it on Wednesday. He says he's incredibly strong, and then even if he gets beat, he he's very hard to block because the effort is there consistently. And I think that's in part he's so good at it because he does play a limited number of sacks. Now, he's got 7 sacks in 93 snaps. It's an absurd number. It's an absurd amount of sacks for the amount of snaps that he's had. But it shows the sort of relentless way in which he plays. I just have to talk about for a second, though. We noted how invisible Zach Allen was on the field a couple of weeks ago. My goodness, that was as good as... I think that's the way we saw him play against Philadelphia is what the Cardinals have envisioned for him, because he was that productive in college at Boston College. Getting sacks, he got his hands on a ball that was tipped. The tackle production, it was just insane to see. He played 74 snaps, and I think now that we see what he can do, it's a matter of keeping him healthy. And clearly, when he came back from that ankle injury, he wasn't 100%. I'm really excited to see what he's got in the final 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah, and that's been his big knock thus far. He can't stay healthy, and he's been I don't want to say difference maker, because that might be overstating it, but he's been a good to very good player when he's healthy. And so when he came back, it was clear that something was off, because he was virtually non-existent. And he's, he is a effort player, but he's athletic. He's strong, and he understands the game. And so his inability to make plays those first couple of games back, I always, especially young guys, I like to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think right now you can still give him that, because I think he's showing what he could be if he's ever able to stay healthy. That's going to be a key for him moving forward, is can you as a player stay healthy?
Coming up next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. We're going to move on and talk about the Pro Bowl. That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's talk about the Pro Bowl. The Cardinals have 3 players who are selected. It is Kyler Murray, Budda Baker, and DeAndre Hopkins. Budda Baker, we probably felt was kind of a given. DeAndre Hopkins as well. How surprised were you that Murray made it in his second year?
I'm not surprised. I mean, one, he's a huge fan favorite outside of Arizona. I think that's a big thing for, a lot of this, because it's 33% of the vote.
Yes.
Oklahoma has a big NFL presence in the NFL, obviously, and so I think that helps, because again, that's 33% of the votes. And then you've got the coaches and executives or whatever it is voting as well, the other 33%. I look at different things, and one of the things I look at is that I think that players and fans really like Murray. The closest quarterback to him in, kind of the statistical realm that he was in front of in Tom Brady, I don't know how many fans and players love Tom Brady. Respect is different. Love is, and so when you look at it kind of from that perspective, because Brady's really in the NFC, the only guy that has the entire package that you can compare to Murray, and say that Murray, or he was snubbed with Murray getting in. Obviously, Matt Ryan and Jared Goff have more yards, but they have less touchdowns, and they play on terrible teams. So, I'm always surprised when somebody gets in over Tom Brady. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is the number 1 or 2 on the MVP list right now for everybody. And remember, Russell Wilson was number 1 or number 2 for most of the season on everybody's MVP list. So when voting was really taking place. So those 2 make sense. I think he earned it. I think he deserves it. I am a bit surprised that he was able to get it over Tom Brady.
For me, honestly, but the way that Brady started the year, like, with all the talk that there was of, is he washed up? And I think people are noticing that on film, he's not what he was. And then you had Murray with the running production early on, the touchdowns. I think I'm honestly not surprised, especially with the season that Lamar Jackson had a season ago. When you see a player like Murray and the hype that he had coming into this year, and his production has matched the expectation, which, believe it or not, it's amazing to think that what we expected out of him as a rookie, he exceeded. He's doing what we sort of hoped that he could do, that we felt was reasonable that he could do in that second year jump. And he is matching, if not exceeding that. Again, it's just going to show the type of buzz that he had coming into this season. His production has matched it. And especially now, you kind of knew he was going to be a star. And once you saw the production, especially in both passing and running, I'm not surprised he got in over Tom Brady this year. And it's just exciting because the Cardinals haven't had a quarterback like that ever. Like you go back to the we saying that Neil Lomax was the last homegrown or Arizona or Cardinals drafted quarterback to make the Pro Bowl, and that was before they came to Arizona. So this is something special, and to get the Pro Bowl in year 2, because the hardest Pro Bowl for a player to make is that first one, because as the adage goes, you never get in the first time when you deserve it, and you always end up staying a year longer. You end up making one more that you shouldn't. The fact that he gets in year 2 means that people see him as a star.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing for him, is to kind of continue to take that step as a star, to be the next guy, to be the next, big thing. I'm hoping his career, and not that there's anything wrong with how Lamar Jackson's played this year, but I'm hoping his career is similar to what we're seeing out of Josh Allen, where he's progressively gotten better year by year, and he maybe doesn't max out on that, kind of what we've seen from Lamar Jackson this year, which is, let's be honest, still phenomenal. But he's not quite taking that next step that we had hoped to see. The other thing with Murray getting in that I think played a huge role, and again, I don't want to take anything away from Murray, because I truly believe he deserves this, is that Drew Brees only played in 10 games. I think if Brees had played in 14 games, he probably would have gotten the nod over Murray. I just think his injuries this year kind of gave Murray the nod over him slightly, but that's just me. So completely fair to say, and honestly, I kind of forgotten about Brees because of the injuries, and they continue to win games without him. And so when Taysom Hill's starting games and you're winning games, and you're wondering, well, are they winning because of Brees? And I think the league is recognizing, in part, the Cardinals are winning games because of Kyler, because the defense is the supporting cast is except for DeAndre. And DeAndre's fantastic. And I don't think there's any doubt DeAndre's going to make the Pro Bowl. He's leading the NFL in receiving. He has that reputation. It's not a surprise in his first year. Now, do you think that is anyone else deserved a Pro Bowl nod on the Cardinals roster? I think, and he talked about it in his interviews, that DJ Humphries probably deserved one. He's been one of the better offensive tackles. I should just say offensive lineman, but he plays tackle, so offensive lineman in the NFL this year. But the reality is this: he plays the same position as 3 I would guess to say legacy is probably the easiest way to explain it. Legacy left tackles. Obviously, the oldest, Trent Williams of the 49ers, made it. Williams has been in the Pro Bowl a lot, and that's, kind of putting it mildly. I think he was a 7-time Pro Bowler with the with the Washington football team when they were 8-time Pro. Oh no, 7 after, yes, 8 including this year. So yeah, 7-time Pro Bowler with the Washington football team. Teron Armstead is a multi-time Pro Bowl left tackle, 3-time Pro Bowl and 1-time All-Pro, I believe, in his 8-year career in the NFL. Holy cow, he's been around for a while now. And then David Bakhtiari is playing at maybe the best level, and again, another 3-time Pro Bowler, 1-time All-Pro, and again been in the NFL 8 years. Those are tough guys to overcome at the position. And so, has DJ outplayed some of them? Absolutely, he has. But he's outplayed them to a minuscule point that he's not been so much better that he's, going to overtake one of those guys in the Pro Bowl. And that's just the reality of the NFL.
Well, in this case, it's exactly with DJ, what we were just talking about. The first year you deserve a Pro Bowl, you usually don't get in. Now, he also has to overcome the reputation he had from years before. But he's now put 2 healthy years together. This year playing at a pretty high level. But yeah, it's hard to get in for a left tackle, especially when you've got guys that have been there for a while. It would be nice because the Cardinals, their last Pro Bowl offensive lineman was Mike Iupati, and he was riding his Pro Bowl years. That was his first year with the Cardinals, and he was riding the success he had had as a Pro Bowler with the San Francisco 49ers. Before that, I think the last offensive line was an actual Pro Bowl. Levi Brown was an alternate one year. We know that. But I think it was Lomas Brown.
Yeah, I think Lomas Brown
Lomas Brown for crying out loud.
90, was that 99?
No, I think it was the 96 year. 98. It was there. It was
90,
a playoff.
98.
It was a playoff year because he walked after that and signed with Cleveland. So yeah, so it would be a huge thing to happen. I understand why it didn't. You can't blame. You can't.
And he
wasn't going to
it.
get in. He just wasn't going to get in over it. And since there's no alternates this year, he didn't get to named as an alternate and didn't get to get added to the roster because of an injury / Super Bowl team or whatnot. So in a normal year,
that definitely hurt him this year.
In a normal year, he probably makes that roster. Now we were talking before the show how maybe Kenyon Drake deserved or is worthy of consideration. He's in the top 6 or 7, is it, in rushing? He's been solid. He hasn't been flashy like he was in 2019. But we were talking before the show, and you said, well, the 3 guys they have in the Pro Bowl make complete sense. You got Dalvin Cook having a monster year, Aaron Jones having a monster year, Alvin Kamara. He's not putting up huge rushing numbers, but he's got over 1,500 scrimmage yards. You could say that Kenyon Drake deserves a mention, maybe an alternate, but there's even some guys who should go in ahead of Drake, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've got David Montgomery, who's been kind of the Bears' offense, especially during the kind of lull between Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky, who has more yards, higher yards per carry, more attempts than Kenyon. And then you've got Ronald Jones, who's missed a couple games and has, same type of thing, more yards per attempt than Kenyon Drake. So those are 2 guys, and I'm not saying they're better or anything of that nature, but when you look at the Pro Bowl and you're just saying from a statistical perspective, Kenyon Drake's probably the fifth or sixth running back in the NFC. And it just happened that he's playing, at a stacked position this year in the NFC where, like you said, Dalvin Cook and Aaron Jones are, I think, both in the top 4 for NFL in rushing. So, I mean, right away, they're statistically having better years than Kenyon Drake. And then, like we said, you're talking about Alvin Kamara, who has 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns so far from scrimmage. Again, just flat out better than Drake. And he's only 100 yards rushing, around 100 yards rushing behind Drake on 50 less carries. So, he's having an ultra productive year, maybe not in the traditional, grind out type of way, but in just putting up huge numbers. And so Drake, again, like DJ, probably deserves a mention, but I don't know who you put him in over.
Right, and on the defensive side of the ball, with no Chandler Jones, there's Hassan Reddick. I mean, he had all his production in the last 2 games. Buda's already in. Patrick, definitely not a Pro Bowler this year. Drape, no. Jordan Hicks deserved a Pro Bowl in 2019. He is not putting up the same sort of stat line he did. Doesn't deserve it this year. And so you're looking at, like, it defensively, it makes perfect sense. But yeah, honestly, I'm pleased with who got in. Kyler was a surprise. DJ was a little bit of a disappointment, but you understand. So I have no problems with how things played out with the Pro Bowl. It worked out pretty well, and especially the fact that you're not going to have the players dropping because of injuries. There's no actual game, and there's no alternates. And so this is about what you could have expected.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest. The thing that the Pro Bowl means this year more than anything is for guys like Drake and Murray when you're talking about their next contracts. Obviously Drake because he doesn't have a contract going into 2021, and Murray for his negotiation when you're talking about Pro Bowls and you're talking about how contested the Pro Bowl situation is. I mean, we just went through it, and you can look and say, look, in a year where they didn't even have alternates, I was one of the guys. That's a huge feather in the cap just for negotiation purposes for Murray, moving forward. And so that'll be, in the end, because there's like Jess said, there's no actual Pro Bowl. They're not missing much in terms of getting a trip, those fringe bonuses. What they're missing is the opportunity to have that, hey, look at what I did, type of thing in their contract negotiations.
Coming on next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move on and talk about the playoff scenarios. What do the Cards need to do to get in? What are the possibilities that they have? That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's talk playoffs. Playoffs? So the Cardinals now control again their destiny, sitting at 8-6. They're right on schedule where we want them to be. How likely do you think to get in? They've got San Francisco. They've got the Rams in Week 17. Just looking at the schedule they've got, looking at who's behind them, how likely do you think that they make the postseason?
I think it's going to be tough, and here's why. I think that this game, and you asked at the beginning what I'm most excited about or what interests me the most, and that was the reality of it. This where they're at right now interests me the most because I think it gives us the most in terms of what this team is. The Cardinals have a really difficult task ahead of them, and that difficulty is sweeping a division opponent even in a down year. doing that is difficult. You know, you look at last year, the opposite way for this game, and how hard the 49ers had to work twice to beat the Cardinals. And, you know, it almost didn't happen. And so when you look at it from that perspective, I think that's how you kind of you play it. And then the second thing is you have a Bears team that has a miserable Jacksonville team next week, and then could play a Green Bay Packers team that may not have anything to play for. So the Cardinals need help, not in the sense of, you know, to make the playoffs, but they need help in that they need one last buffer, basically. And I know that's not what fans want to hear, but to expect them to beat the Rams for the first time in the Sean McVay era on the road in Los Angeles in week 16, when the Rams will have something to play for, no doubt, it just seems like a tough ask. And so I think the bigger ask isn't of Jacksonville. Obviously, I think that ship sailed last week when they decided to, or when the Jets decided that they were going to beat the Rams. Where did that come from, by the way?
Jeez. Of all the things, that made no sense at all.
I think the bigger ask in this one is, can the New Orleans Saints beat the Minnesota Vikings Friday night on Christmas? This has nothing to do with the Cardinals. That's the odd thing with this kind of ask, is that it doesn't really have anything to do with the Cardinals' playoff chances or anything like that. But if the Saints win, they can push the Packers if the Packers lose to the Tennessee Titans this weekend, which is a viable thing. The Titans are a good football team. That's the biggest thing, because you need the Packers to have something to play for, which in this instance is the 1 seed in the NFC. If the Packers are playing for the 1 seed in the NFC, then I think you're in a good spot, because as desperate as the Bears might be, the Packers are going to be just as desperate. I mean,
they'll want that, because that's the only bye this year. If you haven't remembered that, because of the adding of that 7 playoff team, that means only the number 1 seed will get a playoff bye.
Yeah, and so the last thing the Packers want is to lose to the Bears and then have to potentially play the Bears again the first round of the playoffs, when the Bears are the 7 seed. Now, the Packers would probably win that game and you know, eliminate the Bears. But just having the opportunity for that game to mean something is so much bigger for the Cardinals, because they, as we've talked about before, blew their buffer with their losses to the Lions and the Panthers. Again, games that, when you look back, aren't necessarily about playoff seeding or anything like that. They're just about a team that blew an opportunity. And that's what happened in this with the Cardinals, is that they blew their opportunity to hold tiebreakers with like opponents against the Bears, and for that matter, the Vikings before this weekend. And that's where it comes down to, is that the Cardinals, if they get into a tiebreaker with the Bears, basically cannot win tiebreakers. And go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's because, it's essentially, here's how it plays out. So if the Cardinals go 9-7 and the Bears go 9-7, I mean, they win out, they will, it goes to the second tiebreak Well, the third tiebreak, because they didn't play each other, so there's no head-to-head. They would have the same conference record, which means it goes to the common opponents. I believe the Cardinals would be 2-3 or 1-4 in those games, but it's the same case with the Vikings. With the Vikings and the Bears, the Cardinals cannot beat them in the common opponents, and so that essentially puts the Cardinals in a position. If they win out, they're fine, but the Bears, because of their schedule, it would have been really helpful if the Vikings had won, because their schedule is a little tough, because then they could have lost to the Saints and then be eliminated if the Cardinals beat San Francisco.
Right. And so we talked about it a little bit last week. We were pseudo cheering for the Vikings because of that issue, and that's what it comes down to, is that there are times when you just you don't have the opportunity to play the games, or the games kind of get away from you, and that was unfortunately one of them, in that the Cardinals they lost that opportunity to control their own destiny when it comes to the mathematical equation part of it. And so obviously they control their own destiny, win, and you're in. That's super simple. But I still think that asking this team to beat the Rams on the road is it's too much of an ask right now.
Although it's going to be really interesting, because either way, if the Rams win this weekend, they basically clinch the division. If the Seahawks win, they clinch the division. But if the Cardinals beat the San Francisco 49ers and LA wins, the Cardinals are going to be in a position to get out of that 7th seed, because if the Cardinals, Seahawks, and Rams all finish 10-6, which is a possibility. It's not likely, but if it's a possibility, then the Cardinals would actually finish in second place. The Rams would win the division. The Cardinals can't win the division. Now, I posted initially at the start of this week, I applied a tiebreak incorrect. So if the Cardinals win out, Seahawks lose out, that means all three teams are 10-6. I believed I applied the tiebreak of the head-to-head incorrectly and applied that individually, and I thought that would give the Cardinals the division, because the Rams would have beaten the Seahawks twice, and that bumps them out. And then it would go conference record between the Cardinals and the Rams. That was incorrect. I applied it wrong. So it is, when you have a three-way tie in the division, you take the head-to-head record up against the other two teams combined. The Rams will have, if they are 10-6, the Rams go 3-1 against them. They win the division. But if the Cardinals finish 10-6 and the Seahawks are 10-6, that means the Cardinals will end up in second place. They will pass the Seahawks because they will have gone 4-2 in the division, and Seattle would finish 2-4 in the division, giving them a better seed. But that would require the Seahawks to lose to the Rams and to the 49ers, which honestly could happen, but just doesn't seem super likely. But both the Rams and the Seahawks are two teams that are hard to figure out this time of year.
Yeah, and the big thing is, and obviously the easiest way to look at it is win and you're in. It's a simple, cliche slogan, but that's the reality of it. And you don't want to have to rely on the Rams not playing hard, or what are the Seahawks going to be playing for? Those type of things. When you get into that, that's when you tend to get into trouble as a team. But that could be where they're at, and like I said, the big thing is, to me, is going to be, do the Packers have something to play for in week 17?
So yeah,
it would really
Saints fans
suck.
we're both Jaguars fans and Saints fans this weekend.
Yeah.
So Cardinals fans, remember that. So send all those good vibes for the Jags. Who knows? The Jaguars are inept enough that they will probably mess this up and win the game, right, which is fantastic. The Saints, that's not as hard to ask, although that offense does not look the same without Michael Thomas. And so it would be really helpful for Green Bay to be motivated to play in Week 17 to play for a victory, because that would be sweet to clinch in Week 17, no matter what, and get the Cardinals into the playoffs. Coming next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the weather. Let's wrap this up and talk about the game this weekend against the 49ers, playing on a Saturday instead of a Sunday. What is there to look forward to? That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. The 49ers this weekend, only this 49ers team does not look at all like the 49ers team that they started the season with. For one, no Jimmy Garoppolo. 2, no Nick Mullins. Instead, it's going to be C.J. Beathard with Josh Rosen as the backup quarterback likely. No Raheem Mostert. Deebo Samuels hasn't practiced this week. Javon Kinlaw hasn't practiced this week. Nick Bosa's already out. You've got Deion Jordan, who's been limited. Richard Sherman, who hasn't practiced this week. Jimmy Ward, who's got a concussion, hasn't practiced this week. George Kittle's still out. Maybe comes back. My goodness, this San Francisco 49ers team is nothing like what we expected them to be.
No, and they're struggling, and it's showing. I mean, they lack the overall talent that they were expected to have. You know, obviously, when you lose the best tight end in the NFL and one of the top 3 or 4 pass rushers in the NFL. I shouldn't even say pass rushers. When you lose one of the 5 best defensive players in the NFL, it makes a huge difference. And you're seeing that thus far from the way they're playing. I mean, just look at the stats in the games. I mean, that you're talking about. Last couple weeks, they gave up 41 to the Dallas Cowboys. They gave up 23 to the Washington football team in a loss. They gave up 34 to the Buffalo Bills, 27 to the Saints, 34 to the Packers, 37 to the Seattle Seahawks. 2 games that they've played, or 3 games that they've played well, really since week 3. They gave up 16 to the Rams in a win. They gave up 6 to the Patriots in a win, and then 20 to the Rams in another win. And not shockingly, those are their only 3 wins in this time. Since week 4, when they've only won 3 games since week 4, they've given up 25, 43, 37, 34, 27, 34, 23, and 41 in their losses. I mean, that's just not a good football team. Let's just call it like it is. And that's not a shot at the 49ers. That's not a shot at their fans. That's just the reality. I mean, that's just not a good football team when you're giving up, close to 30 points a game. And that's just not what we expected of them. And realistically, I don't remember a team that had such massive injury issues in a season that were, contenders. Everybody has injury issues, but I don't remember a team that was considered a contending team that, came into the season with high hopes. And then by week 2, you're talking about, no George Kittle or Nick Bosa. You were talking about, no Richard Sherman. I mean, those aren't just guys. Those aren't, I'm trying to think of Cardinals players, that would be like the Cardinals losing Hopkins and Murray on offense. That's what it's akin to. And so, if the Cardinals lost Hopkins and Murray, would we really be expecting much from the team? No. And that's kind of where the 49ers are right now. All that being said, we've talked about it ad nauseum is how many coaches are in the NFL are as good as Kyle Shanahan. How many coaches in the NFL get as much out of their quarterbacks as Kyle Shanahan? And they still have great defensive players in Eric Armstead and Fred Warner. So, I think that they're a good team still that can make enough plays. All of that being said, and again, this is not a shot or a dig at the 49ers. There's no reason the Cardinals should lose to this team.
Definitely not. And it's when you're going against C.J. Beathard. If you got Kyler Murray versus C.J. Beathard, let's not forget 2 years ago when it was Josh Rosen versus C.J. Beathard, and it was a terrible Cardinals team. Guess what team won? Both times. That was the Cardinals. The Cardinals picked up 2 of their 3 wins against a C.J. Beathard-led 49ers teams in 2018.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that, we saw this week that the Cardinals have the ability to get out and put kind of a beat down on a team. The question is, can they maintain and sustain that dominance? And that is something that is what true contending teams do. And that's been a question of mine all season is, are the Cardinals really contenders, or are they just a good team? If they find a way to win and keep their playoff hopes alive and kind of control that 7th seed, then yeah, they're a good team. They're be an above 500 football team, guaranteed. They'll have multiple Pro Bowlers. You'll probably see an All-Pro or 2 nod. I would assume DeAndre Hopkins is an All-Pro this season. Budda Baker will be one to watch. But, they're going to be a good team. The question becomes, are they a team that you fear in the playoffs? Or are they first-round playoff fodder? And that's going to be what the question becomes. And I truly think that they have the ability to be a team that maybe they don't win a playoff game, maybe they don't, but that goes in and competes with the New Orleans in round 1. I truly do think that they have that talent, but they have to find a way to sustain success, not just throughout a season, but throughout a game. And I kind of laugh because the Philadelphia game was what I think was a perfect kind of microcosm of this season for the team. They had their huge beginning that got them out to a quick start, and you're like, oh, here they go. And then they just kind of hit this lull where you're like, okay, let's, why aren't we going forward? Why aren't we moving forward? And then they did enough at the end to win the game. And it seems like they're kind of in that they're doing the same thing. They got that fast start. They got off to 5-2, 6-3, and then they kind of, walked their way through to get, back to 6-6. And now they've won 2 in a row, albeit against, bad NFC East teams. But they have a chance to kind of finish strong and prove that they're a playoff team. The question is, can they do it? And I think this weekend they start to show that they're close. They're not a true, quote unquote contender right now, but that they're a very good football team that could make some noise in the playoffs.
What is your prediction for this game? I see them controlling this game. I've got this one pegged at 31-17. I think I've got them winning this game.
Yeah, I would say something similar to that 28 to 20 type of game where, maybe it's a little closer than you'd like, but they're ultimately the better team that wins this game.
Well, hopefully that's how things play out. We get a Saturday dose of football this weekend. If you haven't paid attention, the game is airing, nationwide, worldwide on Amazon Prime and on Twitch. But no worries, locals here in the Phoenix area and those in the San Francisco, Santa Clara market, you will get to see it on your local station. Here in Phoenix area, it will be on Fox 10. And with that, we've come to the end of episode 292 of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast. We didn't have anything cutesy for Christmas. Hopefully what the Cardinals bring us for a Christmas gift is a win, and Jaguars win.
Yeah,
or Saints win. That would be fantastic. It would be the greatest gift of all to clinch this week and not have the pressure of having to beat that Rams team. As much as I want to beat that Rams team, I want to see them win. But if the Rams are playing for something still, which they might be, because if they beat Seattle, they have a chance at the division still, as even if Seattle wins. But it's going to be interesting. So our Christmas hope is a Cardinals win, a Jaguars win, and heck, even a Saints win. Why not?
Yep, let's hope everybody has a great Christmas holiday time. You enjoy the Saints Vikings game. You get three games on Saturday. I think we get the Bucks and the Lions, which technically has some something for the Cardinals, because the Cardinals could overtake the Bucks for that 6th seed. And then you've got who's the late game? I can't even remember. But
Raiders, Panthers, I think.
Yeah, no, Raiders, Dolphins.
That's right.
And so you've got 3 enjoyable football games over the weekend, or 4 actually enjoyable football games over the Friday and Saturday to get us to NFL Sunday, and then hopefully you guys have a great holiday break and a great New Year's, and kind of enjoy the next couple of weeks of Cardinals football.
And we'll bring that show to an end. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. We will have a show next week. It'll be with me, maybe Seth, maybe someone else. We'll see, depending on how things play out. But that'll wrap this up. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again next week.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms, so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up Red Sea, be Red Sea Red, and of course, Rise Up Sea Red.